Hello everybody, welcome back to the AdvancedVape channel. Today we're going to be kind of taking a step out of my comfort zone and looking at a mouth-to-lung RTA. This is the HASTUR mouth-to-lung RTA from CTHULHU. It's single coil, and you can kind of choose between a very restricted lung hit or full-on mouth-to-lung. There's a lot of different options there for how restricted you want the airflow to be. So just to get started, I'll show the tank itself. It's kind of a GTA sort of setup where the deck is lifted up off of the base. It has top fill through a little, I've never seen this kind of top fill before. It doesn't unscrew, it just kind of sits in there with little pins that sit underneath the lip there. And this is the drip tip it came with on there, and there's no restrictor in there right now. And I'll show you in the box. It comes with, it looks like a frosted glass and a much smaller diameter drip tip there, as well as behind the instructions. Several different airflow restrictors, and you also have the option for a few other different kinds of airflow restrictors. This one has 3, and it can go down to extremely small. This one has 2 holes. One small one there, and there's the 3, and another that looks like maybe a little bit smaller. And the ones that it comes with in the package are on the bigger side. This is the smallest of them, it looks like. And this would be the biggest. So there's kind of just all kinds of graduations in between there. So a total of 8 different options there. And I'm going to do kind of 2 builds for this review. I have a build in there right now with no restrictor, and I'm going to kind of test that as I would anything else with just a lung hit. So vape it like I would any other single coil RTA. And then I'm going to put a restrictor in and put a much smaller build in there. And I'll probably change the drip tip too and try that. So let's kind of set that stuff aside, and I'll show you what the deck looks like. It's kind of similar to the Serpent SMM, except there's no airflow there. It's just one thing in the bottom there. And I wanted to kind of go with a small coil. This is still a 3mm diameter, so that's probably as big as it's going to hold in there. And it might be better to do 2.5, but I decided I'd give 3 a try in there. And this is currently a 0.5 coil, so fairly low resistance for this kind of setup in a single coil. And we'll go on and get through the dry firing and the wicking and try this out really quick. Okay, so this is 4 strands of 32 gauge wire wrapped with 40 gauge wire. Kind of a Clapton going, a very small Clapton going on there. And for wick, I'm going to be using rayon today, just because it wicks really quickly, and I don't think that wick speed is hugely important on this like it is with more high performance things, but I think it still does need to keep up with you, especially if you're doing a somewhat bigger build. If you're doing a mouth-to-lung kind of thing, not really an issue. It's going to keep up with that because there's not a whole lot of juice being vaporized there. I probably could have made these legs just a little bit longer to touch down to the base of the deck. But this should be okay. I'm not going to put a whole lot of juice in there because I'm going to be taking it apart again. And this setup doesn't really, you can't really work on your build with the tank apart because the glass isn't really stuck onto that O-ring. One thing I want to point out real quick, you want to make sure that where these errors are is kind of where those notches are. You want to make sure that's in the middle. If you have it close to the end, just having it in your pocket can cause that to pop open. So you want to make sure you close it as much as you can. Okay, so I'm going to try this at about 30 watts to start out with the airflow all the way open. It's a really nice, mellow, cool kind of vape. I would expect the flavor to not be what it is. It does have good flavor. It's not, in my opinion, you can't really compare it to the higher performance stuff that I typically vape that I enjoy, because that's kind of just dumping a huge amount of clouds and juice at you. So that gives you stronger flavor. And this one is more mellow, a little bit more dry. It does have a little bit of moisture to it, but nowhere near high performance kind of stuff. But you can definitely get the flavor of the juice from it better than other very restricted single coil RTAs that I've tried. I can tell that it's not wicking super fast, and I have no doubt that I could kind of optimize that, put less wick in there and make it longer, a little bit more sparse in there. Um, but it's just kind of a mellow, dry vape anyway, so it's really not a huge issue, and I think that would be even less of an issue if you're using this mouth to lung, which is kind of how it's intended to be used, I would guess. It does put out more clouds than I was expecting. It's just a kind of a laid back, real smooth airflow kind of vape. So I'm going to take this apart and take the build out, and then the next build that I'm going to put in, and I'm going to skip through all the dry frying and the wicking and everything so that you don't have to watch it twice. But the next build is going to just be 30 gauge wire by itself, stainless steel. I'll probably do 3mm and 10 wraps. Okay, so I've got the 30 gauge, and it was somewhere between 10 and 11, so 10 and a half because it's opposing legs. Installed in there 3mm. And I put the tightest airflow restrictor on there with the smaller chimney thing, and it's 1.5 ohms, and I'm going to be vaping it at 10 watts. You know, for mouth to lung, it seems like it performs better than most that I've tried. The flavor, it's there, but it's weak for me because I'm used to lung hits where there's juice hitting your tongue, and that's never going to be the case with the mouth to lung kind of setup. I can still tell the flavor and everything, but I can't pick out all the different flavor notes that I would get either on this with no airflow restrictor in there or something bigger, which is what I normally vape. This in mouth to lung though, it's an easy to use setup, and I feel like it would last forever. This is a 3.5 milliliter tank. Vaping it at 10 watts or even 30 watts on a bigger coil, it's going to last a really long time. I would easily say this would last days for me, and if you had a juice in there with a higher nicotine content, which you pretty much have to have, it's going to last a while. I'm vaping 3 because that's all that I normally vape. So if you were actually, vaping on this setup day to day, you would need a higher nicotine content just because there's not a whole lot of vapor there. It's a mouth to lung, so that's just how it is. But it's one of the first ones that I've tried that I feel like I could comfortably and continuously do mouth to lung. There's always been a sort of there's just a little bit too much airflow and it makes you want to cough, or it's so restricted that even mouth to lung, you're pulling too hard. And the fact that this has 8 different options, or 9 different options, you can cater it to exactly what kind of build you want, and that sort of fits perfectly with mouth to lung users, because I know that a lot of them that I've talked to, they're very particular about their particular setup that they like, their airflow amount. So having those different options is kind of crucial to fitting the needs of those people. And I feel like that makes this all around the best mouth to lung RTA that I've used. That's not saying a whole lot, because I don't typically do mouth to lung, but for that setup, I enjoy it. And even as a lung hit RTA, I enjoy the flavor on it. It doesn't have the airflow of other single coil RTAs. It's definitely more restricted, but it does have good flavor with that kind of setup. All in all, I think if you're into restricted airflow kind of vaping, or you like mouth to lung, it's absolutely worth checking out. And the build quality is always good with Cthulhu products. So I'd say it's worth taking a look if that's your style of vaping. That'll bring us to the end of this video about the HASTUR Mouth to Lung RTA. If you like this video on our channel, give us a like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, leave them below in the comments or send me an email. Thanks.